In the vast immensity of South America, where the rivers whisper secrets and the jungle hides ancestral mysteries, a man rose with the strength of a volcano. He was more than a priest. He was a divine spark that illuminated the darkness of a world broken by injustice. His life, woven with courage, faith, and sacrifice, was not just a testimony, but an eternal cry that resonates to this day. This is the story of Saint Roque González de Santa Cruz, the martyr who challenged hatred with love and sowed hope where there was only desolation. Prepare to immerse yourself in the tale of an immortal soul, a hero who still lives in the hearts that touch his teachings. The boy who looked at the sky. In the year 1576, in the heart of Asunción, a boy named Roque González was born. From his earliest days, those around him noticed something different about him. While other children ran carefree through the streets, Roque sought the silence of the chapels, where he could gaze at the sky and lose himself in the contemplation of a world greater than he. There was an unusual depth in his gaze for one so young, as if a calling lived inside him that he did not yet fully understand. His childhood was marked by devotion and discipline. The priests of the city saw in him a promise, a future spiritual leader who could illuminate the path for many. He was often seen organizing games that ended in reflections on faith, leaving his friends amazed at his maturity. He was not just a child. He was a guide even to those older than him. Roque also stood out for his love for the Eucharist. From an early age, he felt a special connection to the sacrament, which he saw not only as a symbol, but as a refuge and a source of strength. He spent long hours in prayer, nourishing a relationship with God that would shape his entire life. It was as if, even before fully understanding his vocation, his soul already knew where destiny was leading him. But his childhood was not without its challenges. In a world marked by inequalities and tensions, Roque began to notice the injustices faced by the indigenous people of his homeland. As he grew, these observations awakened in him a silent yet unshakable determination. One day, he would find a way to alleviate the suffering of those who were ignored by society. The years of his childhood were just the beginning of an extraordinary journey. With each passing day, young Roque drew closer to the moment when he would have to respond to the calling he had felt for as long as he could remember. He was still a child, but the fire in his heart already burned with an intensity that could not be ignored. The priest's dream. The path to the priesthood was not easy for Roque, but it was not a surprise either. From an early age, he showed a natural inclination toward spiritual life. As he progressed in his studies and relationship with the local church, his vocation became clearer. For him, the priesthood was not just a role. It was a mission, a sacred responsibility that went far beyond rituals and traditions. At 22, Roque was ordained a priest in the city of Asunción. He was young, but his faith and determination were profound. This moment marked the beginning of a new stage in his life, a stage that would take him to the remotest and most dangerous places in South America. For Roque, the priesthood was not a path to comfort or prestige, but a calling to be with the most needy. From the start, it was clear that Roque was no ordinary priest. His connection with the Guarani people set him apart from his contemporaries. He spoke their language, understood their customs, and most importantly, saw in them human beings worthy of respect and love. This empathy drove him to dedicate his life to defending their dignity, even when it put him at odds with the powerful. But not everyone shared his vision. Many of his Spanish colleagues saw the Guarani as mere resources and Roque as an idealistic fool. However, his steadfastness in his convictions did not give in to criticism. To him, each Guarani was a sacred life, a soul that deserved to be known and loved. This perspective placed him in a difficult position, but it also strengthened him in his mission. Roque's priesthood was a constant act of sacrifice. Every day he woke up with the certainty that he was following the path God had laid out for him. Though there were many difficulties, his faith never wavered. He knew that, in the end, each small act of love and service made a difference, even if the world did not see it. The first mission, saving the yerbateros. Roque's first mission as a priest took him to the yerba mate fields of Maracaju, where the indigenous workers lived in conditions of slavery. It was a place where suffering and hopelessness seemed to have deeply taken root. But for Roque, these fields were not just a work site. They were a spiritual battlefield, where he had to fight for the dignity of those who worked there. From day one, Roque understood that his mission was not just to preach the gospel, but to show through actions what God's love truly meant. He spent his days working side by side with the indigenous people, sharing their burdens and listening to their stories. At night, they would gather around the fire, where Roque would speak to them of a God who did not see them as slaves, but as beloved children. The yerba mate fields were a tough place, both physically and spiritually. The encomenderos, who profited from the labor of the indigenous people, saw Roque as a threat. They tried to discredit him, accusing him of being an agitator. But Roque was not intimidated. With each sermon, with each act of kindness, he reinforced his commitment to the yerbateros, reminding them that they were not alone. The transformation in the yerba fields was not immediate, but it was profound. Little by little, the indigenous people began to see in Roque someone who truly cared for them. Their faith, which had been crushed by years of oppression, began to be reborn. For many, Roque was not just a priest. He was a friend, a protector, a light in the darkness. This first mission left an indelible mark on Roque's heart. Although he returned to Asunción at the order of his superiors, he never forgot the yerbateros or the lessons he had learned among them. This experience prepared him for the even greater challenges that awaited him, the rejection of the powerful. Back in Asunción, Roque faced a new challenge, the misunderstanding and rejection of those in power. The Spanish encomenderos, furious with his dedication to the indigenous people, began to attack him verbally, calling him unlettered for not having studied at European universities like Alcalá or Salamanca. To them, Roque was an obstacle, someone who stood in their way to wealth and absolute control over the Guarani people. Roque, however, did not seek the approval of the powerful. For him, his mission was clear: to protect and guide the most vulnerable. Despite the criticism, he stood firm, convinced that he was following the path God had laid out for him. He knew that confronting the encomenderos was dangerous, but his faith and love for the indigenous people were stronger than any threat. The rejection was not limited to words. The encomenderos tried to discredit his work and put him in conflict with the church. But even amid this opposition, Roque found allies among his fellow Jesuits and the indigenous people who recognized his authenticity and courage. His determination never wavered, and every challenge became an opportunity to strengthen his mission. Despite the difficulties, Roque continued to preach and work for the dignity of the indigenous people. His ability to connect with them, speak their language, and understand their customs made him unique. While others saw the Guarani as a problem, Roque saw them as brothers in the faith, souls worthy of love and respect. This period of rejection only served to deepen his commitment. Though the powerful tried to silence him, Roque knew that his voice was needed. To him, every obstacle was a test of his faith, a reminder that he was fighting for something much greater than himself. The decision to follow the Jesuits. In the year 1609, Roque made a decision that would change the course of his life: to join the Society of Jesus. For him, this was not a simple choice, but an act of total surrender. The Jesuits represented everything he aspired to be: men dedicated to God, committed to education and mission, and willing to sacrifice everything for the gospel. Leaving behind his former life was not easy. He had to give up the comfort of a stable position in the church and face a future filled with uncertainties and challenges. But for Roque, the call of God was stronger than any fear. In May of that year, he officially entered the society, beginning a new chapter in his life. As a Jesuit, Roque found a community that shared his passion for mission and love for others. His superiors soon recognized his talent and dedication, assigning him increasingly challenging tasks. But for Roque, Every challenge was an opportunity to grow in faith and serve others better. Life in the society was not easy. The days were filled with prayer, study, and hard work. But Roque embraced every aspect of this life with joy, seeing it as a way to draw closer to God. His companions admired him for his humility and bravery, recognizing him as a true spiritual leader. Joining the Jesuits not only transformed Roque's life, but also his mission. Now, with the support of the society, he was ready to face the greatest challenges of his life, taking the gospel to the remotest and most dangerous corners of South America, the challenge of the Guaycurúes. One of the first major challenges Roque faced as a Jesuit was the pacification of the Guaycurúes, an indigenous people known for their bravery and fierce resistance. This mission, considered almost impossible, was entrusted to Roque and his companion, Father Vicente Griffey. Together, they ventured into the Chaco, determined to bring the message of the gospel to this untamable people. The arrival in Guaycurú territory was tense. The indigenous people, used to being persecuted and betrayed by colonizers, looked at the priests with distrust. Roque knew that he could not win their trust with empty words. He spent days observing, learning, and seeking ways to connect with them from a place of respect and humility. Little by little, he began to approach the Guaycurú leaders, listening to their concerns and showing a genuine interest in their culture. Instead of imposing his faith, Roque offered his help and friendship. His approach, based on love and understanding, began to bear fruit. The Guaycurúes, who had initially rejected him, began to open up to his message. The mission was not without its dangers. On more than one occasion, Roque faced death threats, but his courage and faith never wavered. He knew he was risking his life, but he also knew that each soul he touched was worth the sacrifice. Over time, the Guaycurúes began to call him Santo Ignacio Guazú, a title that reflected their respect and admiration for him. This experience marked a turning point in Roque's life. The mission with the Guaycurúes not only demonstrated his courage and dedication, but also his ability to transform even the hardest hearts. For him, each obstacle overcome was a reminder of the power of love and faith. The Conquistadora, the image that changed everything. In the year 1611, while preparing for new challenges, Roque received a gift that would accompany him in all his future missions, a picture of Our Lady of the Conception, later known as La Conquistadora. This gift, given by Father Torres Bolo, was not just an image. For Roque, it was a symbol of protection and divine guidance. Wherever he went, the picture traveled with him. In the hardest moments, when everything seemed lost, Roque would cling to the image, asking for strength and wisdom. The indigenous people, seeing his devotion to the Virgin, began to associate the picture with miracles and blessings. To them, La Conquistadora was not just an image, it was a testimony of God's love. As Roque continued in his mission, the picture became a symbol of hope. In every reduction he founded, he placed the image in a prominent place, reminding everyone that the Virgin was with them. This act not only strengthened the faith of the indigenous people, but also united the communities around a common cause. On one occasion, during an epidemic that devastated a reduction, Roque placed the picture at the center of the village and prayed fervently. According to reports, the epidemic began to subside shortly afterward. For the indigenous people, this event was a testament to the power of the Virgin and Roque's unshakable faith. Over time, La Conquistadora became an inseparable symbol of Roque's mission. In the moments of greatest danger, he always found comfort in the image, remembering that he was not alone. For him, the Virgin was a constant companion, a light in the darkest moments, sower of faith in unknown land. In the year 1626, Roque embarked on a new chapter in his mission, bringing the gospel to lands that today are part of southern Brazil. In these vast regions, dominated by untamed nature, he decided to found reductions that would not only serve as centers for evangelization, but also as refuges where the indigenous people could live in peace and develop their potential, away from the oppression of the encomenderos. The first of these reductions was San Nicolas, established on May 3rd of that year. For the Guarani people, this place represented a new hope. There, Roque celebrated the first Mass, a symbolic act that marked the beginning of a new era for that land. But the foundation was not just a spiritual event. It was also a political and social act, a direct challenge to the colonial structures that exploited the indigenous people. Over time, Roque founded other reductions such as Candelaria, Casa Pa Mirim, Caro, and Asunción de Lihui. Each one became a beacon of faith and community, offering not only catechesis but also agricultural education and opportunities for cultural development. In these places, the indigenous people could live according to their customs, integrating their spirituality with the Christian faith in a harmonious way. Roque's work in these reductions was not easy. Each foundation was an act of resistance against a system that did not want to see the indigenous people free or empowered. The encomenderos saw him as a threat, while some indigenous leaders, influenced by local sorcerers, considered him an intruder. However, Roque faced all these challenges with patience and determination, trusting that his mission was guided by God's hand. Each reduction he founded was a testament to his faith and love for others. For Roque, it was not just about preaching the gospel, but about building a better world where human dignity was respected and justice prevailed. These communities became a legacy that would endure long after his death, a reminder that love and faith can transform even the most difficult circumstances. Darkness looms over the mission. While the reductions founded by Roque González flourished and the Guarani people found in them a refuge of peace and dignity, opposing forces were also unleashed, seeking to destroy his work. The encomenderos, furious that the reductions had taken away the indigenous labor they considered essential for their profits, began to conspire against him. But it was not only the hatred of the colonizers that loomed over Roque. He also faced resistance from some indigenous leaders influenced by local sorcerers who saw him as an intruder challenging their traditions. Among these opponents was the sorcerer Nyesu, a powerful figure in the region near the Caro reduction. For Nyesu, Roque's presence and his message of love and redemption were a direct threat to his influence. Cunningly, he began to sow fear among the indigenous people, accusing the missionary of being an enemy of their ancestral beliefs and seeking to destroy their customs. The sorcerer's words found an echo in some hearts, intensifying the tension in the region. Roque, however, did not allow himself to be intimidated. He knew his mission was not easy and that he would face opposition on all fronts. With each sermon and each act of love, he reinforced his commitment to the Guarani people. He continued preaching peace and reconciliation even as rumors of plots against him intensified. Inside, he was prepared for sacrifice if it meant fulfilling God's will. In the days leading up to the break, the atmosphere in the Caro reduction grew tenser. Some indigenous people, influenced by Nyesu, began to distance themselves from the community, while others remained loyal to the priest who had transformed their lives. Roque, aware of the danger, did not abandon his people. For him, martyrdom was a price he was willing to pay for his mission. Darkness loomed ever closer over Roque's mission, but even in those critical moments, his faith remained unshakable. He knew that, although his earthly life might end, his work would endure in the hearts of those who had found new hope in it. The tragedy that was approaching was not the end, but the beginning of an eternal legacy, the last sacrifice. On November 15, 1628, a disturbing air hung over the Caro reduction. Roque González, true to his daily routine, was preparing to celebrate Mass, unaware that it would be his last. Although he had received warnings that his life was in danger, he did not let fear distract him from his mission. In his heart, he knew his destiny was in God's hands. As he celebrated the Eucharist, a group of men sent by Nyesu silently approached the chapel. Armed with stone clubs, they waited for the precise moment to attack. When Roque finished the Mass, the men pounced on him. The first blow was brutal, but not enough to bring him down. With inexplicable strength, Roque tried to stay on his feet, looking at the sky while murmuring one last prayer. The second blow brought him down, but even in that moment, his spirit was unbroken. According to reports, the indigenous people present heard a voice that resounded powerfully, "You killed the one who loved you so much." These words, attributed to Roque's heart, filled the attackers with fear and remorse. But their hatred did not stop there. To erase all traces of the missionary, they tore out his heart and stabbed it, believing that by doing so they would destroy his legacy. Roque's body was taken to a place where the attackers tried to burn it along with the image of Our Lady of the Conception. However, according to witnesses, the flames did not manage to consume either the body or the image. For many, this was a miracle, proof that Roque had truly been a man of God. Roque González's martyrdom was not a silent end. His death reverberated throughout the region, inspiring those who had known his love and sacrifice. Despite the pain of his loss, his work continued to grow, proving that his spirit remained alive in the communities he had transformed. The voice that never goes silent. After Roque's death, rumors of his martyrdom spread quickly. The Guarani, who had remained faithful to him, spoke of the miracles that occurred in the days following his murder. One of the most striking stories was that of the voice the attackers heard when trying to burn his body, a cry that pointed out their ingratitude and reminded them of the love he had shown them. The image of Our Lady of the Conception, known as La Conquistadora, also became a symbol of Roque's spiritual power. Despite attempts to destroy it, it remained intact as a reminder of the faith he had sown. The indigenous people began to venerate it with even more fervor, believing it was a direct link to the priest who had given his life for them. The relic of his heart, which was preserved after his death, became an object of devotion. For those who knew him, it was a symbol of his unshakable love and his bravery in the face of hatred. The story of his martyrdom inspired many young missionaries who saw in him an example to follow in their own work. Although the days following his death were marked by pain, they were also filled with hope. The reductions Roque had founded did not disappear. On the contrary, they continued to grow and thrive. His legacy became proof that love and faith can overcome even the darkest tragedies. Today, Roque González's voice continues to resonate in the hearts of those who know his story. It is not a voice of reproach, but one of inspiration, a call to live with courage and to fight for justice, regardless of the cost. The legacy of a martyr. The fruits of Roque González's work quickly began to manifest. The reductions he founded became models of coexistence, places where faith, culture, and human dignity coexisted in harmony. Despite the attacks and difficulties, these communities prospered, carrying forward the mission Roque had started with so much sacrifice. In the year 1988, more than 3 centuries after his martyrdom, Pope John Paul II canonized Roque González along with his fellow martyrs, Alfonso Rodriguez and Juan del Castillo. This recognition not only honored their lives, but also the lasting impact of their work in Latin America. Today, Saint Roque González is remembered as a symbol of courage, faith, and love. His story continues to inspire those who work for justice and dignity, reminding them that even in the darkest moments, the light of the gospel can shine brightly, the light that endures in the reductions. After Roque González's martyrdom, the reductions he had founded continued to grow, defying the expectations of those who thought his work would crumble without his leadership. These communities, built on the principles of faith, justice, and unity, became refuges not only for the Guarani, but also for the hope of a better world. San Nicolás, the first reduction founded by Roque, flourished as an example of what could be achieved with love and dedication. In every corner of this community, one could feel the presence of the missionary, not as a distant memory, but as a living inspiration that continued to guide the Guarani on their path. His teachings resonated in every prayer, in every act of generosity, and in every seed planted in the fertile soil. The other reductions, such as Candelaria, Caro, and Asunción del Ijuí, followed the same path. There, the Guarani learned to cultivate the land, build their own homes and live in harmony, integrating their ancestral culture with the Christian values Roque had transmitted to them. These communities became oases of peace amidst a world plagued by conflict and exploitation. But the reductions were not without their challenges. The encomenderos, still resentful of the loss of their control over the indigenous people, attempted to sabotage them on multiple occasions. However, the spiritual strength Roque had instilled in the Guarani allowed them to resist these attacks and continue advancing, proving that love always triumphs over hatred. Today, the reductions founded by Roque González are remembered as a legacy of his courage and dedication. They were not just physical communities, but living manifestations of his faith, places where human dignity was restored, and where the message of the gospel found its highest expression in service to others. The example of the martyrs. Roque González's sacrifice was not an isolated act. Alongside him, his companions Alfonso Rodriguez and Juan del Castillo also gave their lives for the faith. These three men shared not only a mission but also an unshakable spirit that led them to face hatred with love and death with courage. Alfonso Rodriguez, Roque's inseparable companion, was murdered shortly after the attack in Caro. His dedication to the mission and his love for the Guarani made him a key figure in the reductions. Like Roque, Alfonso saw in the indigenous people not just souls to be evangelized, but brothers who deserved respect and justice. Juan del Castillo, who worked in a nearby reduction, suffered a similar fate days later. His martyrdom, though tragic, strengthened the faith of the communities he had served. For the Guarani, these three men were not just missionaries. They were heroes who had given their lives to protect and guide them. The example of these martyrs not only impacted the reductions, but also the entire region. Their deaths became a symbol of resistance against oppression and a commitment to the values of the gospel. Even those who had been their enemies began to recognize the depth of their faith and the authenticity of their mission. Today, Saint Roque González, Saint Alfonso Rodriguez, and Saint Juan del Castillo are venerated as the first martyrs of South America. Their legacy remains alive in the communities they transformed, in the hearts they touched, and in the lives they inspired through their example of total surrender. Canonization, an eternal recognition. In the year 1988, more than 350 years after their martyrdom, Pope John Paul II canonized Roque González and his fellow martyrs in a ceremony that united thousands of faithful in celebration. This recognition not only honored their sacrifice, but also highlighted the importance of their mission in the history of the Church in Latin America. The canonization was a moment of deep emotion for the descendants of the Guarani, who saw in this act a tribute to their own history and resistance. To them, Roque was not just a saint, he was a friend and protector who had shared his life with them and who now interceded for them from heaven. During the ceremony, the Pope highlighted the courage of Roque and his companions as examples of faith and bravery. Their lives, he said, are a reminder that true Christianity is not limited to words, but is manifested in acts of love and service. This message resonated deeply in a world that still faces challenges similar to those they faced. The canonization also brought renewed interest in the reductions and the cultural legacy they left behind. Historians, theologians, and religious leaders began to rediscover the richness of these communities and their importance in building a more just and equitable society. The stories of Roque, Alfonso, and Juan return to a central place in the narrative of faith in Latin America. Today, the canonization of Roque González and his companions is not just an event of the past, but a constant reminder that sacrifice and love can transform even the harshest realities. Their holiness is a light that continues to guide those who seek justice, peace, and reconciliation in the world today. A prayer for the ongoing mission. Saint Roque González is a living example of what it means to give one's life for love of God and others. His story invites us to reflect on our own missions and to seek the courage to face challenges with faith and hope. Although his martyrdom occurred centuries ago, his message remains relevant today. Love is the most powerful force in existence. Final prayer, a flame that never goes out. O glorious Saint Roque González, faithful servant of God, who walked among the shadows of oppression to bring the light of the gospel to wounded hearts. You who embraced the cross with love and became a flame that illuminates the path of the poor, the forgotten, and the marginalized, hear our pleas from heaven where you now reside with the saints and martyrs. You who witnessed suffering and did not fear facing injustice, teach us to be brave in our own struggles. Help us to be bearers of peace in the midst of discord, defenders of the vulnerable, and sowers of hope in a world that often seems lost. May your example inspire us to give our lives with generosity, trusting that love always triumphs over hatred. Intercede for us, Saint Roque, so that we may be instruments of reconciliation, building bridges where others build walls. Fill our hearts with the strength you showed, so that we may not fear adversity and can proclaim the truth with humility and firmness. O holy martyr, who in your final breath offered your life for the Guarani and all those who sought dignity and justice, guide us to be faithful in our own missions. May your voice, the same one that resounded from your pierced heart, remind us that unconditional love is the greatest transformative force God has given us. Under the protective mantle of Our Lady of the Conception, La Conquistadora, whom you venerated so much, we ask you to help us remain firm in faith and committed to serving others. May, like you, we live and die with the certainty that our works, guided by God, will have an eternal impact. Beloved Saint Roque González, pray for us and for the entire world. Amen.